I'm Tuan Le Elston, and Tuan Le is a Vietnamese name. I was born in Saigon. It's all of our America, and we all contribute to it. It's up to us to make America be the America that it should be and we want it to be.
What it do, family? In my last video, I wanted to hold off on the two articles that I wanted to read, but in this video, we're going to pick up on those two articles and a couple of more articles I tossed in there, because as the title states, it's been 187 on coalitions and BIPOC, and I love to see it, and we've been very adamant about making sure that Black Americans understand that we are a very distinct group with very distinct interests. And, some people think that, that stove ain't hot and they need to touch it to find out. But we're seeing a lot of situations that proved our point. And now we're seeing situations come out that is saying exactly what we've been saying about Asian Americans when it comes to being puppets of white supremacy, working within the white supremacist system and knowing what they're doing. So I want to get into these articles and we're going to talk about it. So let's start with this article here. Asian American conservatives have become key allies of white supremacy. And this article is written by Promise Lee. Promise Lee is an activist and writer from Hong Kong and Los Angeles, who also has written articles such as What We Can Do Right Now to Stop Anti-Asian Violence, as well as Chinatown Must Radicalize to Survive. Direct action and inclusivity are driving the new Asian American movement. But let's get back to this article. And if you would like to read any of the articles that I'm going to be reading into today, because I'm not going to read all of these articles all the way through, I will be posting a link to all of the articles that I will be using today. All right, this article is from January 6th. So, Asian American conservatives have become key allies of white supremacy. As the death of affirmative action showed, Asian American conservatives are active, militant co-conspirators with white conservatives. In 2014, a California-born sophomore named Michael Wang wrote an op-ed for the Mercury News complaining about bias against Asian Americans in higher education. Despite a stellar academic record, Wang said, he was rejected from top-tier universities across the nation. Applying to college is an anxiety-filled rite of passage for students and parents alike. For Asian American families, however, the anxiety is mixed with dread, Wang wrote. They know that their race will be used against them in admissions, and there is nothing they can do but over-prepare, which is a bunch of bull stuff. And then imagine how we've been feeling all this dang time. They dread it because their race, our skin tone has been used against us for how long? All right, I digress. Wang's perspective, though far from the dominant view among Asian Americans, was one that resonated with many students and parents. It was also one with a powerful supporter, Edward Bloom, the right-wing legal activist and staunch affirmative action foe. Months after Wang's op-ed, Bloom filed a lawsuit against Harvard's affirmative action policies. By 2015, a grassroots movement headed by Chinese and other Asian Americans has sprung up too. Asian American Coalition for Education, co-founded by Wang's father, mobilized 64 Chinese Americans, Indian Americans, Korean Americans, Pakistani Americans, and other Asian American organizations to file a civil rights complaint with the Department of Education and Justice, building on Bloom's lawsuit. So where's this black and brown coalition? Because as we saw, and we're getting to a little bit later with another article, the Hispanics are plotting against us, trying to take away our voting power and all this other stuff. And we have, the other so-called brown or minorities, and it went down the line. Chinese American, Indian American, Korean American, Pakistani American, and all these other Asian groups literally got together, formed a coalition in order to shut this down while being funded and pushed by Edward Bloom. You dig? Let's move on. Last week, Wang, Bloom, and their allies got their wish at long last when the Supreme Court struck down the use of affirmative action in college admissions. The ruling represented a critical victory and consolidation of the Asian American conservative movement, one that is years in the making. The forces that finally swept affirmative action away could soon come to discover that their victory is a hollow one. That's because, as researcher Janelle Wong, Viet Thanh Nguyen, Nicole Gon Uchi, and Ian Poon, I might have slaughtered all those names, but oh well, have pointed out, reversing affirmative action only strengthens the population of white students at the expense of black and other minority students, including Asian Americans. Well, it really didn't benefit us at all anyway. The number one benefactors were white women. And we know from statistics that one out of three of every black student that was admitted on the affirmative action program were black American. So it benefited more than other groups, more than it benefited ourselves. So, hey, it is what it is, right? But we must be clear about one thing. Asian American anti-affirmative action activists have not been simply used by white activists and duped into this white supremacist policy. They are active, militant co-conspirators with white conservatives. They are building a key flank for the right wing across the nation, and the left must urgently recognize that right-wing politics precisely gain power by recruiting conservative ideologies amongst communities of color that overlap with, but retain distinct aspects from white supremacy. And this is what we've been talking about all this time, how everybody who claim to be people of color, they love to say that, yeah, we're with you and all this other stuff, claim to be minorities, but they get over here and they start implementing policies and pushing for policies that is detrimental for the black community, that goes against the interests of the black community. This is what we've been talking about. Over 20 years ago, before he wrote The Sympathizer and became a mainstream literary success, Nguyen recognized critical limits within the rubric of Asian Americans as it has been conceived. Scholars and activists in the community tend to treat Asian American identity as a category of resistance. But as Nguyen described, the overemphasis on movements for progressive causes obscures a more troubling reality of the ideological heterogeneity of the diverse Asian American population and the willingness of a considerable portion of that population to participate in and perpetuate self-commodifications and the social and economic practices that lead to it. These Asian Americans are those who feel most at ease with the paradigm that Claire Jean Kim observes in her theory of racial triangulation, which characterizes how Asian Americans have long been recruited into functioning as a model minority to reinforce the structural oppression of black people and the privilege of white people. Despite the fact that they cannot fully assimilate into whiteness, certain Asian Americans do enjoy privileges in Kim's framework. Indeed, as she wrote in The Nation, it is the convergence of this nascent conservative Chinese immigrant nationalism with an older conservative white nationalism that is driving anti-affirmative action policies today. And this is the part here. This disturbing alliance has only grown in strength in recent years, finding a common cause in the safeguarding of capitalism and anti-blackness. The outgrowth of anti-Asian violence have driven some Asian Americans to call for more police funding, direct aligning with the right-wing movements. The rise of China in the global sphere has also stoked existing anti-communist sentiments amongst Chinese, Vietnamese, and other diasporas. So, at the end of the day, these folks has been working with these people to hold us back, just like other communities, just like the Top Hat community, just like the Latino community, just like these other communities have done and continue to do. These folks have been doing this for years, all while screaming black and brown, minority, 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 black and brown, minority, 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 playing the role as a model minority while disrespecting the black and brown and making sure any policies that would benefit us go down. And if you remember about the case in New York, where the brother was talking about their being moved out, they tried to make him a xenophobic, called him anti-Asian, when he was just speaking the truth. And they were themselves trying to keep black people out of their own communities. Those Asian women that was there. How much sense does that make? But if you want to finish reading this article, like I said, this and as well as the other articles that I'm going to be reading will be in the description, because it is quite a lengthy article. But I did want to get to that point because it made that point abundantly clear. It made it abundantly clear that Asians have, found a common cause, as the article said. Safeguarding capitalism and anti-blackness. That's their common cause, their commonality. But and this is why I wanted to put it in the previous video, because in the previous video, as Neely Fuller said, we were talking about, if you don't understand white supremacy, what it is and how it works, then everything that you think you know will only confuse you. And these Asians are now getting that wake-up call because they thought they were in with white supremacy. And as the article says, even though they can't fully assimilate into white supremacy, they do have privileges that they benefit from. But now they want to speak out, saying that they are being hindered in areas because of their race, when they just literally said that they were being hindered because black people are getting their spots. Affirmative action, affirmative action. But now you have them saying things like, we can't get the proper raises and promotions that these white folks are getting. So they're confused as hell. And this is why I wanted to bring it up in the prior video. Because when you think you're working with white supremacy, after they done with you, what? White supremacy break all its tools. Now watch how these are getting broken. Let's go to the next article. And like I said, if you want to read the whole article, it'll be in the description so you can jump over there and check it out. But I'm going to read from the different excerpts that I have. Okay. Jaya Kumar is one of the growing number of Asian Americans in the tech industry breaking their science and going public with charges of discrimination and retaliation. In a series of recently filed lawsuits, they say that racially bias spanning decades in Silicon Valley that typecast Asian Americans as worker bees have shut them out of management and executive positions with greater power, profile, and pay. Isn't that the same thing black folks been going through for years and years and years? Sound like it. Don't sound any different. But, get it away from black folk and now they can use our excuses, right? But I digress. The patterns of discrimination experienced by Ms. Jayakumar mirrors that faced by the broader Asian American community. And no, I didn't mess up. That's exactly how it was written. Others make assumptions about what work Asian Americans are suited for, Jayakumar's complaint said. Asian Americans are unsupported in the workplace in taking on leadership opportunities, which is okay. Yeah. I know you looking at me the same way I'm looking at you. We looking at each other the same way we looking because we understand. Yeah. Through her lawyer, Jaya Kumar is demanding that Meta make policy changes from tracking the rates of promotions for Asian Americans to training managers in tropes and stereotypes about Asian American employees. Meta declined to comment. Now, here's the thing. When it's us and we're saying, this is what y'all need to be doing for black Americans, this, that, and the third, they say, well, if you really want to be fair, why did it have to be just for black Americans? Why can't it be for everybody? But yet, right here, they're making a demand to Meta, aka Facebook, that says, no, we're going to need you to kick in and make sure that you're doing these things for specifically Asian Americans. And ain't nobody saying that this is divisive. Ain't nobody saying anything. But it's funny that this is happening after, the so-called affirmative action ruling drops down. And these people that thought that they were in good are being shown that, nah, not so much. Nah, not so much. So this whole black and brown experiment has been an awful fail. An awful, awful, awful fail. And really, people within their own communities is calling it out. Black people, we've been calling it out. Black Americans, we've been calling it out too. But now you have people within their own communities jumping out and saying, you know what, my community ain't shit. My community ain't shit. And this is why. And this is why. Let's jump real quick into these next couple of articles, and then we're going to get up out of here. The Black and Brown Coalition is a dangerous fantasy. A fantasy and a scam. Let's get into it. The dangers of the Black and Brown solidarity mantra has been in full view the last 2 days. 2 days ago, an audio was leaked of 4 brown politicians making the most violent anti-black comments in a discussion about redistricting in Los Angeles. In the audio, a Los Angeles councilwoman named Nuri Martinez fantasized about beating up a 6-year-old black child for the crime of being born black. The 3 others present chimed in with racial comments, saying the little boy was an accessory to his white adoptive parents the same way Louis Vuitton bags is to women. The 4 Latinos say he looked like a monkey. They were plotting ways to diminish the voting power of black residents in Los Angeles through gerrymandering. But now that the audio tape of their racist meeting has been made public and they're being called out, these same Latinos are falling back on the Black and Brown Coalition scam to explain away and justify their racism. Martinez released an apology basically claiming her racism was not really racism because she was defending people of color. She framed her racism as an intra-family dispute amongst black and brown siblings. The other members of the racist meeting are doing the same. So this should be very clear. It's very clear. It's 187 on this black and brown experiment. It's 187 on these coalitions and BIPOC titles and all this other stuff, people of color, all this other crap. It's 187 on it. It's 187. But even though, as the black community starts to wake up more and more to their own interests and to our own interests, to the way that we must move, we must also remember who it was that tried to throw these people in our faces as coalitions, as allies, as people who needed these folks to represent us as well. So let's jump into this last article before we get up out of here. This article comes from the Griot from 2010, and it's entitled The Myth of a Black and Brown Coalition on Immigration. Opinion. It's time for black leaders to stand on the side of black citizens and legal immigrants over lawbreakers who undermine black prosperity. And even when it's talking about and singling out black Americans, they still had to throw some immigrant in there somewhere. But let's get into this article. There is a significant disconnect between many black leaders' opinions that supporting illegal immigration represents fairness that will benefit black Americans and the black rank and file who wonder why foreigners float American law should be rewarded with amnesty and special privileges for their criminal behavior. Self-proclaimed black leaders are promoting a pro-illegal immigration agenda which comes at the expense of African Americans. The NAACP has joined with the American Civil Liberty Union, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and other groups to challenge the constitutionality of Arizona's new law against illegal immigration, claiming that the law will lead to racial profiling. Reverend Al Sharpton has protested at the Arizona State Capitol, arguing that what disproportionately impacts Hispanics similarly impacts blacks. He stated, "We must stand with our brown brothers and sisters." And this is what they always have done. Sent out your bootlicks, sent out your so-called leaders, your so-called children of Martin Luther King. I was raised and trained at the feet of Martin Luther King. And all of these coons, these so-called ex-civil rights leaders, they're the ones that sit here leading the black community to black destruction, to economic destruction. This is what America has been producing to us. And this is how we got where we are today, by listening to these bootlicks. Meanwhile, Reverend Jesse Jackson has urged Major League Baseball to pull the 2011 All-Star Game out of Arizona in response to the law. Even though the black unemployment rate is nationally at 17% and much higher in certain cities, the Congressional Black Caucus doesn't mention illegal immigration as a top priority. So, in all of these situations, we ain't had nobody coming out and speaking for us. We ain't never had Jesse Jackson urging Major League Baseball to pull out of a state because we're being unjustly unalived all over the goddamn nation. We ain't had none of these folks speaking up for us in any of the proper manners. But yet, they had no problem. They had no problem going to bat for these same people that came here and come here to disrespect us, to eat off our plate, and to make sure we stay at the bottom of the table so we can never get to the plate that we ourselves have created. The food that we ourselves have cooked and prepared. These are the people that's doing it. These are the people. So now that Our community is starting to wake up more and more to our self-interest and fight for our self-interest and to make sure that none of y'all and none of these bootlegs can come in and say the type of stuff that they were saying in 2010, 13 years later. We're divisive. We're this, we're that, because we're standing on our square and we don't care who comes in here with that nonsense about, well, we got to stand with our other brothers and sisters because we're not the only ones going through oppression. None of that matters to us anymore because we've been so inclusive. What good has it done us? What good has it done us? We voted blue no matter who for over 60 years, and what good has it done us? What good has it done us? We've been so black and brown, that we forgot about the interests of the black, because the brown don't have the claim that us black folk, us black Americans, us descendant of American slaves have. And that's the fact. So, this is a death. This is a 187 kill shot on coalitions and BIPOC. That's it. And if anybody come to you talking about this nonsense, and it ain't about reparations or your interest in the black community, you should be shunning them. You should be turning your head and spitting at their feet. Get the hell out of my face type stuff. Because at the end of the day, it's time for us to rise and watch everyone else fall to the wayside. And it ain't out of hatred. It's out of self-interest. To be economically included. To be just civilly and socially included. And humanly included, because we have rights around this place. But we also have a claim that nobody else have. That everyone else come here to take advantage of. We built this country. So we ain't got to group in with nobody else because we have a specific claim. A very specific claim for building this country. If you haven't did it already, hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe. Hit that notification bell. If you already subscribed, check and make sure you wasn't unsubscribed because YouTube does do that a lot. Make sure you share this. Get this information out. The more you share it, the more we can beat up the algorithm. Help me stomp out the algorithm so we can get this message out to our people. And with that being said, the doors of the church are closed. Peace, family.